Squawk: How to Stop Making Noise and Start Getting Results by Travis Bradberry, Ph.D. Narrated by Lloyd James. Copyright 2008 by Dr. Travis Bradberry. This unabridged audiobook is published by arrangement with Collins Business, an imprint of HarperCollins Publishers, and was produced in the year 2008 by Tantor Media, Incorporated, which holds the copyright thereto. Part 1. The Fable. Chapter 1. The Seagull Manager. For as long as he could remember, Charlie had been flying high at work. When he shared this sentiment with others, most forgave the pun, not just because Charlie was a seagull, but quite simply because he was a seagull who truly loved his job. And up until recently, it was an easy job to love. As the head gull in a flock whose sole undertaking was pillaging the food court of a marine theme park in Southern California, he felt business was a genuine pleasure. Many years earlier, Charlie's flock had lived with the rest of their breed at the seashore. Charlie was well known among the gulls because he was gutsy and passionate, and his head was always swimming with ideas. One day he shared a fascinating vision of a place where a little ingenuity would ensure their prosperity. Charlie had seen the place firsthand, and many of the gulls returned day after day to hear him talk about it. In time, the cocksure leader convinced a group of them to break away from the petty pecking grind at the seashore and join him to form their own flock in a place they knew only as the food court. When the new flock landed at the marine park, they found that the food court was even better than they had imagined. All of the food there was fattening and easy to come by. The unsuspecting humans were no match for the gulls' aggressive dive bombing. For years, the resourceful gulls enjoyed a life of abundance, snatching food from unsuspecting tourists by day and roosting safely on a craggy hillside at night. While the other flocks back at the seashore battled the pelicans and humans for the ocean's dwindling supply of clever, speedy fish, Charlie's flock enjoyed a generous supply of tasty grub brought to them daily by the patrons of the food court. And no gull in the flock knew more than Charlie about when, where, and how a gull could nab a hearty meal. Charlie was so good at eating that the flock named him their manager. Not that there was much for him to manage. There was so much food around that keeping the flock content and their bellies full was easy. For the longest time, Charlie didn't have to worry much about keeping everyone happy. Nowadays, things are decidedly different. At first, there was the odd baby pecking out of an egg here and there, but the babies grew quickly. Soon, the newest members of the flock had hatchlings of their own. In what felt like no time at all, the flock's size tripled. Unfortunately, the food court did not. The marine park continued to be a popular place, but only so many sunburned tourists could squeeze into the food court at any one time. Initially, the flock's new mouths to feed were welcomed with open wings because there was plenty of food to go around. But it was only a matter of time before abundance and prosperity gave way to bickering over who got to peck first at an abandoned plate of nachos. In the old days, a squabble among flock members wouldn't last long. Some of the birds would simply move on to the next ready meal. As time and change transformed food into a scarce commodity, the squabbles became more frequent and more dramatic. With each passing month, the food supply became increasingly inadequate, and the gulls' hunger eroded the camaraderie of the team. When the latest hatchlings reached maturity, Charlie still felt he was doing an excellent job running the show. He filled his days with the same essential activities he always had: negotiating the boundaries of marine park turf with other birds, resolving conflicts between flock members, undertaking an occasional grunt mission to dive bomb unsuspecting children and snatch their sweets, and, for stress relief, dropping precision-guided munitions down the backs of shirtless sightseers. It was business as usual for Charlie, and he loved it. That is, until he returned to roost one blustery evening, and found the flock in the middle of a heated discussion. Charlie overheard small snippets of their conversation, something to do with concerns about the food supply, and he immediately mistook their debate for bickering. As he was prone to do, Charlie was squawking orders before his feet even touched the ground. He landed in the middle of the flock, flapped his wings like crazy to back them off, and finished with a tirade that supposedly held the best course of action. Usually when Charlie finished solving the problem, he would fly off to his next responsibility, leaving little opportunity for discussion. But on this night, with all the gulls gathered together in the roost, he had nowhere else to go. Charlie's slow realization of this fact created an awkward silence. He strutted around with his chest puffed out and his wings pulled back long after he had run out of things to say. He looked at the faces surrounding him and realized they didn't hold the usual array of befuddled looks. Instead, the gulls looked strangely determined, almost as if they were expecting this. Scott stepped forward. He was the flock's top performer, and his glossy coat of feathers and stout frame were a stark contrast to the emaciated gulls behind him. Scott had been with the flock since the beginning, and he was not one to mince words. "Charlie, we've got a serious problem here." "Really? What's the matter?" Charlie asked, assuming there had been some type of accident. "We're hungry, Charlie. Nobody's getting fed," Scott replied, glancing at the gaunt birds huddled on either side of him. Charlie scanned the flock of gaunt seagulls himself. "Oh, man, just look at all of you. Are those dang sparrows snatching all of our food?" he asked. The flock responded with a profound silence. "Are you listening to me?" Charlie demanded. "Don't worry. You don't need to worry. Just get to it. You guys can outwit any bird that's leaving you hungry. I know it." "Charlie, you're not getting it," Maya said as she squeezed her way forward. "That bird, the one that's leaving us hungry, it's you." Like Scott, Maya had been with the flock since its inception, and her wisdom and insight were highly regarded. Unlike Scott, she was generally understated, and her poignant allegation sent an immediate murmur through the flock. "Whoa! What? Me?" Charlie stuttered, dumbfounded. "I'm not the one who's been eating all of your food. I hardly even see all of you most days." "Well, that's part of the problem, Charlie," Maya said. "What do you mean exactly? How am I eating your food if I'm not even here?" Charlie scratched his head with the tip of his wing as he spoke. Scott stepped back in. "You're not literally eating our food, Charlie. The problem is we don't have enough food to go around, and under your leadership things aren't getting any better." "How am I supposed to make sure everyone has enough to eat when you don't even tell me there's not enough food to go around?" Charlie asked, indignantly. "We've been trying to tell you for some time, actually, but you just don't listen to us. Kind of like tonight. You assume you know what's going on. It's why we gathered here, so we can talk to you about it." "All right, if that's the way it is, and let's hear what I'm doing wrong," Charlie continued. "I want to know how I'm responsible for you all not getting enough to eat." Yufan, a recent import from Taiwan who had joined the flock. He'd become trapped in a shipping container that was, unfortunately for him, filled with cans of tuna, although his beak was still a little dull from the journey. Stepped forward and asked if he could share the flock's example with Charlie. Heads nodded enthusiastically around the semicircle. As Yufan prepared to speak, Charlie felt a lump growing in his throat. Everyone is in on this one, he thought. "Charlie, you do not understand the problems we're having with the food supply, because you aren't around most of the time. You disappear until you see us squabbling, or we ask you for help, and then you come swooping in out of nowhere and—" "Well, I'm busy. Would you rather I followed you around all day and fed you myself?" Charlie asked, sarcastically. There was a nervous shuffling of webbed feet until Scott ventured, "Now, come on, Charlie. That's not fair. And it's not even the point. Please allow Yufan to finish." Charlie held out the tips of his wings toward the group, took a couple of steps backward, lowered his head, and pursed his beak together tightly to let everyone know that he would now keep it shut and hear them out. "When you swoop in on us because we're having a problem with something," Euphon continued, "you don't get the full story because you don't even try. You're too busy squawking to listen." Scott joined in again. "Just like tonight. You go right into telling us what to do like it's all so simple, and we're too stupid to know what to do." "Wait a minute," Charlie spat. "I never called anyone stupid." Although some of the flock began to cower, Scott wasn't fazed. He knew Charlie well and had thought it would come to this. "You're right, Charlie, you didn't. But it sure feels like you think we're stupid when you swoop in out of nowhere and fire a bunch of orders at us, like we're a bunch of hatchlings that can't come up with any worthwhile ideas on our own. And what's worse is that you take off and leave us behind to clean up your mess." Scott was on a roll and felt that he might just be getting through to his seagull manager. "It's like the time—" "Like when?" Charlie was through with his listening and back to butting in. Euphon jumped in. "All right, Charlie, I know what he was going to say. He's talking about last Thursday afternoon. Everybody remember that fat hairy guy in the orange tank top who bought his wife a supersized plate of nachos with jalapenos right before the food court closed? The humans started to argue, something about she's allergic to jalapenos, and he should have known better. And then the two of them stormed off and left the nachos right there on the table." "And?" Like most who are forced to endure a heap of criticism, Charlie was growing more impatient by the minute. "And we all flew over there for the feast. But even with that huge plate of nachos, there wasn't enough room for every gull to get his beak in there. So we had to stop eating and figure out what to do." "Yes, and?" Charlie beckoned, tapping his foot. "And we weren't sure what to do. There wasn't enough for everyone, and there wasn't any other food available. So we couldn't just send some of the flock off to another table. Plus, no one really had any kind of priority on the nachos, because that couple just left them there." Euphon finally had Charlie's attention. "We're finding ourselves in situations like these every day lately. That's why so many of us are going hungry." Charlie had calmed down considerably. "All right, I see your point. That situation poses an interesting dilemma. But I still don't see what this has to do with my management." "You don't?" Maya blurted out in genuine amazement. "No, I don't. Is there some kind of connection between me and your problem last Thursday?" Charlie asked. Euphon shook his head with disappointment. Behind him, all the exasperated gulls rolled their eyes. Naturally, Scott took over. "Well, Charlie, Maya went off and found you so you could help us figure out what to do with those nachos. You swooped in, landed in the middle of the table, and shot off a bunch of orders that didn't do us any good. You said something glib like, whoever snatched these nachos gets to eat them, and the rest of you need to go find your own food. There isn't enough for everybody. And then you grabbed a couple for yourself and were gone. Poof. It should have been problem solved, but instead, you left us right where we were before. Minus some nachos." "It also made me feel like a foolish hatchling, and look like one to everyone else, when you told the flock that I shouldn't have come to get you, and we should have been able to figure these things out on our own," Maya said. "We've been sizing up our options for some time, and we're planning on sharing our ideas and potential strategies with you. But when you got there, you didn't even give them any consideration. You left us worse off than we were before." "Yeah, instead of helping us solve the problem, it was like you, one of the gulls in the back said, his voice trailing off nervously. "Like I what?" Charlie barked. "Like you pooped all over everything," Scott piped up reluctantly. An almost audible hush fell over the flock. Swallowing hard, Maya decided to back Scott and drive the point home. "You pooped all over us and our problem. You pooped on our ideas, you pooped on our hard work, and then you just flew off and left us there to clean up the mess. To clean up your mess." Charlie felt as if he had just taken a crushing physical blow. Seagulls pooped on people intentionally, to demonstrate their superiority. It was unthinkable that one gull would ever do such a thing to another gull. Charlie's body began to feel heavy as he stood there, motionless, in the midst of the deafening silence. The sting of his flock's feedback made it hard to think straight. He was failing them, and he didn't know what to do. Finally, with all eyes still fixed intently upon him, Charlie spoke. "Okay, I see how it is. You've made your point loud and clear. I'm out of here." And with those words, Charlie flew away. Chapter 2. A Chance Encounter. After Charlie left that night, the flock continued meeting to explore options for finding food. Finding a new manager seemed like an obvious solution, but no one in the flock was the right fit. Maya had great ideas, but she shuddered to think of herself at the center of the flock's attention. The flock considered Scott a leader of sorts, but he knew that his brazen and blunt style of interacting with others would cause too many problems. Yufan seemed like the best candidate. He was a hard worker and a social butterfly, but he was perfectly happy with his position and had no interest in managing seagulls. The flock decided that Charlie was just going to have to change. Charlie returned to the roost early the following morning with his tail feathers between his legs. He was relieved to discover that the other gulls still wanted him there. Scott was eager to discuss the previous evening's events. While the rest of the flock took off to the food court to begin the workday, Scott and Charlie stepped aside for a chat.
I just wanted you to know that we hadn't figured on having our feedback land so harshly on your shoulders, Charlie,"
Scott explained. Charlie nodded as if a truce had been struck.
"But I also want you to accept that our concerns are real. I mean, just look at us."
Scott paused to observe the cadre of seagulls that were waddling, fluttering, and flying their way toward the food court.
"We've grown and changed a lot since we first came here. The old ways just don't seem to be cutting it anymore. We're stuck, Charlie. We need your guidance, your collaboration, your support even, to help us get through this. Every gull deserves a full belly. After all, isn't that why we followed you here in the first place?"
Having had an evening to calm down and think through the gravity of the situation, Charlie was more open to the flock's feedback than he had been the night before.
"You guys are right,"
he admitted. "I just want you to know that I have been trying. I just didn't realize that I wasn't doing a very good job. I'll do everything in my power to fix this. I'm willing to change." News of Charlie's desire to turn over a new leaf was well received by the rest of the flock. The gulls had newfound energy to put back into their work, until the weeks flew by and nothing happened. Sure, Charlie was a little more patient with the flock when they squabbled over food or asked for help, but it remained apparent that he didn't think there were enough hours in the day for him to solve their problems. So the flock decided to present their own ideas for how to handle the increasingly desperate situation. The flock had always talked about how much food there must be in the park, if they could just figure out how to get their beaks on it. Surely their tried-and-true strategy of snagging food from inattentive diners couldn't be the only way to keep their bellies firm and round. Scott was more brazen and prone to taking risks than the average gull, and he had been with the flock since they first came to the food court. It was natural for him to suggest that they quit lamenting the food they were missing out on and go straight to the source. He'd noticed that all of the food served by the food court was delivered each morning before the sun came up. If some members of the flock just got up earlier, they could probably snag enough food from the delivery man to feed the entire flock all day. Much to everyone's surprise, Charlie heard Scott's idea out and even acknowledged its potential, but he wasn't about to let the flock implement the strategy.
"There's no way we're adding a night shift," Charlie told them. "It will be a major disruption to our schedule. We can't have a bunch of tired zombies roaming the food court. This flock feeds at the food court during the day. In one shift, period.
Maya's idea was next. Her clever strategy was focused on another untapped source of food in the park, the gift shop. She noticed that most of the park's gift shops had shelves filled with snacks and candy, and many had their doors propped open to catch the eye of hungry customers. Maya wondered why a stealthy gull couldn't just wait until the clerk was preoccupied, swoop on in, and fly off with a tasty bag of chips. Charlie could sense the flock's growing furor over his rejection of Scott's idea, so he decided to let Maya give hers a try. Charlie understood that Maya's strategy was something of a stealth mission, so he let her be the guinea pig. Just as she often was with her peers, Maya was quiet as a feather on her way into the store. The initial missions went beautifully, and she returned with a bag of chips every time. News of Maya's successful runs convinced Scott that he should give it a go himself. The flock knew Scott had trouble keeping his beak shut, so they reminded him to approach the store quietly. But Scott was too enamored with visions of heroic commando missions that would save the flock to heed their request. He waited outside the store until he found his moment, went in squawking, and came skidding out on his rear with the assistance of the clerk's broom. Charlie promptly announced that stealth missions did not work and that no further raids on the park's gift shops would be conducted. Euphon's idea was the last one for Charlie to ruin. Everyone feared it was the last thing standing between an easy life in the food court and a return to the miserable seashore. Euphon was something of a bulldozer when it came to getting work done. No matter how daunting the challenge, he was the first gull to spread his wings and get to work, not stopping until he was done. Sleeping, eating, and free time meant little to Euphon when there was an unfinished project at hand. It was only natural that Euphon's idea was something of a sink-or-swim proposition. His system was simple. Find enough to eat, and you get to stay. Have trouble feeding yourself, and you're back to the seashore. Charlie loved the idea. It made sense to him. But from the moment Euphon's plan was implemented, teamwork turned to strife as each gull shifted focus to the self-centered goal of maintaining his or her place in the food court. The entire flock became increasingly aggressive in the pursuit of their next meal, which created a chaos that engulfed the food court. Patrons were dive-bombed on all sides by pecking gulls the moment their orders came sliding through the service windows. Food went flying, children left crying, and park employees scratched their heads over this abrupt change in the seagulls' behavior. The park staff couldn't stand their scratching for long. They weren't about to have their customers scared away by a bunch of birds, and they decided that they must treat the gulls just the way a forest ranger treats a bear that has developed a taste for human food and won't stay away from campers. They would capture and relocate the aggressive seagulls. As intelligent and swift as Scott was, his brazenness made him a primary target for capture. In fact, he was the only gull the humans came away with in their net, because their hunt sent the rest of the flock back to the roost in a panic. Kamikaze assaults on the food court ceased. Charlie was off on the other side of the park when Scott was captured. When he returned to roost that evening, Maya and Euphon were waiting to speak to him.
"Bad news, Charlie," Euphon spoke first. "My plan didn't work so well, and the people captured Scott."
"Oh, my!" Charlie was shocked and genuinely upset. "Oh, where did they take him?"
"One of the dolphins overheard the humans saying something about taking Scott to the Salton Sea, way out there in the desert," Maya replied. "Poor thing. It's going to be a long flight home."
"What did he do to slip up and get captured?" Charlie asked.
"He was doing what we all were doing, Charlie. We were fighting over the food because none of us wanted to be sent back to the seashore," Euphon said.
"I see," Charlie continued. "Looks like you guys are going to have to stop doing that."
"Oh, we're stopping, Charlie. We're going to go right back to what we were doing before all this. We're not going to change a thing," Maya said.
"Great! It's settled then," Charlie said happily.
Not quite, Charlie. I am sure you remember a few weeks ago, when we all spoke to you. You said you'd change your approach. And you didn't, Yufan said.
Charlie gulped. It was Charlie's job to manage the flock. He had promised to work alongside them and make things better. He had promised to change. Now the gulls were stuck. They were trapped in the food court and starved by the seagull manager who had led them there.
We're through waiting around for you to change, Yufan continued. There are a few new eggs that are ready to hatch into chicks, so we're going to have to stick around here for a month or so, until they're out of the nest and can fly on their own. After that, we're returning to the seashore.
You're what? Charlie bellowed.
We're leaving, Charlie. We've had enough of this, Yufan said.
Maya, are you in on this? Charlie asked.
We all are, Charlie. It's been a long time coming, she said, sadly.
Charlie looked up at the stoic faces surrounding him, and the room started to spin. For a gull who prided himself on his work, this was an intolerable position to be in.
Don't be too hard on yourself, Charlie, Yufan said, placing a compassionate wing on his manager's shoulder. It just didn't work out. It was fun while it lasted, Maya added.
Charlie reeled away from the other gulls, spun around, and flew off sulking. As the night wore on, competing thoughts tore through his brain. Since taking over the flock, all he'd ever done was try to help. He'd given years of blood, sweat, and tears to ensure their dominance over the food court. But now the old ways of doing things weren't working. Nothing seemed to be clicking, and Charlie didn't know why. Midnight came and went, leaving Charlie deep in thought. He wanted to return to the roost with a plan. He wanted to prove to the flock that they could stay in the food court and be well taken care of. Most of all, he wanted to lead. He paced along the rim of the sea turtle tank until he was startled by a baritone voice that echoed from the darkness. Rattled by the sound, Charlie turned so abruptly that he slipped and fell backward into the water. Charlie recovered quickly, using his webbed orange feet to right himself, and skimmed about the tank, peering into the darkness for the source of the interruption. "Who's there?" he asked.
"I'm right here," a voice replied.
This time the voice was so close that it sent Charlie flopping about again. Charlie looked down and saw the scarred shell of an old sea turtle floating beside him. The turtle's head poked high above the water's surface, with a wry smile. "Why did you scare me like that?" Charlie asked, defensively.
"Oh, I'm sorry," the turtle replied. "I didn't mean to scare you."
"Then what are you bothering me for?" Charlie spat. "Can't you see I'm busy? I'm trying to think over here."
"Well," the turtle explained, "you looked like you could use some help."
"That's for sure," Charlie muttered under his breath.
"Indeed, it is," the turtle answered back.
Charlie was instantly peeved. Who does this guy think he is? A psychic? Imagine this sleepy old water dweller helping me. Boy, I'd love to see that. "So, what is it exactly that I need help with?" he asked.
"My name is Oscar, for your information. And you, Charlie, need to come up with something quick if you're going to stay in charge of that flock of yours."
"Tell me something I don't already know." Oscar had captured Charlie's interest, hidden beneath the sarcasm. Charlie studied the turtle for a moment. He never paid much attention to the sea turtles, in spite of their exhibit's proximity to the food court. Charlie was so busy each day that he'd hardly glanced in the direction of the turtle pool, let alone stopped by to say hello to his neighbors. "So you've been watching me?" Charlie said.
"Indeed I have, and I must admit, Charlie, you're kind of hard to miss. You're always moving about, flapping your wings in the air, and squawking up a storm every time the other gulls get into a bind. It's really quite a scene," Oscar said.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?